ETA on Jeju at a co-ed middle school. And I am from Seattle, but I attended the greatest university in the country, University of
Yeah,
North Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is going to be a pretty UNC-focused discussion, everyone. I hope you're ready for that.
yep.
okay.
Awesome.
Um,
Thanks, John.
so,
I'm taking
yeah,
I'm taking notes, so I might I'm just taking notes on everyone on the call. So, all right, I captured John.
So professional.
Courtney, you want to go, Courtney?
Sure, yeah. Hi, my name is Courtney Hill. I studied at the University of Arkansas. I'm from Arkansas. I studied engineering, but I'm an ETA. I teach in Changwon at a math and science high school here, so it's pretty close to Busan. But yeah.
Awesome.
Zoe, do you want to go next?
Sure.
Hi,
I'm
Zoe.
Zoe. Hi. Good to see you again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. So I am originally from Austin, Texas. Forgot where that was for a second, apparently. I am proud to be the third Tar Heel on this call. And I am currently in Daegu, teaching at a co-ed middle school.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ladies first.
Okay, thanks to Marley. Hello, I'm
Hi.
Katrin, and as evidenced by my defensive nature, I am placed in Gwangju, which I love. I'm at Kukje High School, which is a co-ed high school, and contrary to the name, it is a normal co-ed high school. It is not an advanced school, even though everyone thinks it is. And I am from Miami, Florida, and attended the lovely Amherst College in Massachusetts.
Very cool.
Cool. And hi, Hogan. First time to see and meet you. I'm Jamarli. I am a second-year ETA. My first year was in Jeonju. I'm not sure if you know that.
I do, yeah. My
And
my very best friend from Fulbright actually was in Jeonju as well. So yeah.
Oh, boy, cool. And my second year, I'm now in Champyeong, which is right outside of Gwangju. So I'm right there with you, Katrin. Go Gwangju. Woo woo. And college. I went to Kobe College.
Okay.
So different kind of blue. Not a Tar Heel blue, but a different kind of blue.
Okay.
And I studied American Studies with a concentration in pre-law and
Okay.
African American Studies, or Afrikaans-ish.
What type of school are you teaching at right now?
Co-ed high school.
Awesome.
Somewhat advanced.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
All right.
quick recap. We've got John, Courtney, Zoe, Catherine, and Jamarli. Is that correct?
Cool. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So, I guess the format I'll go over quickly of how we're gonna do this. Oh, we got one more person.
Hunting.
Okay, Luke,
You have to mute myself.
are you able to speak tonight, Luke?
Yes.
Okay. Can you
yeah.
give your introduction real quick?
Sorry. Hi, I'm Luke Bunting. I teach at an elementary school in Yangchun, and yeah, that's me. I'm
Where are
from
you from,
Indiana.
Luke?
Went to Butler University, studied political science and history.
Awesome. What city are you in? Your elementary school where?
I'm at an elementary school in Yangchun. It's about 40 minutes outside of Daegu.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Great.
All right. So the format. So you all came up with questions for Hogan, and we're gonna spend the first segment of this video call with mostly just Hogan answering these questions, and then with whatever time that's remaining, we can kind of have more of an open back and forth discussion. So yeah, let's just get going. So question number one, how did you market your Fulbright experience when applying for the jobs you've had in DC?
So Actually, John, do you mind if I give sort of a quick background, a little bit more about myself, and then we'll jump into the questions? I wanted to provide that context before we.
Yeah. Sorry, that'd be great.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think you guys probably got this and whatever John already emailed out. But again, real quickly, I'm Hogan Medlin. I was a 2011 ETA. I lived in Busan. I taught at an all-girls high school on an island just off of Busan. I moved to DC right when I left Korea. Quite literally landed in DC and moved into a house and had items shipped up from my home in North Carolina. And I've been here ever since, and I've had a bunch of different jobs here in DC. I've lived in 3 different places, so I've gotten to know sort of, how to find your footing in this city that can be rather complicated for folks in their 20s, really trying to, make it here in DC as their first sort of career after college, beyond the Fulbright experience. So I'm happy to, absolutely be here with all of you. I think this is a really good idea. I love that. It's kind of funny. In 2011, there was an effort to build an alumni relations committee or structure, and it didn't quite have the support of what currently seems to be happening. I think this is really great. Adds a lot of value, I think, to your Fulbright experience, and I'm a little jealous that you get to have these really cool webinars with probably more interesting alumni than myself. But so kudos to you, John, and your team, and all that you're doing, and thanks for having me. Okay, so the first question, let me think about that. I personally, and you'll notice this probably on the call, I do better when I'm on the fly. John was great enough to send these questions over, but I intentionally did not look at them because I think gut reaction in many of these situations is actually going to provide you with a more accurate response. In terms of packaging your Fulbright experience, let me sort of be the first one to I probably am not the first person to tell you this. Like, the name Fulbright does turn heads, and I think you've got to figure out, in your own narrative about, where you come from, what you did in school. I'm not sure if any of you, or if all of you are straight out of college into Fulbright, or if maybe some of you worked a little bit before you did Fulbright. That would be an interesting thing to know about each of you. But the one thing that I'm learning in my own sort of development in my career here in DC and just in general is that folks care a lot about your story, right? They're not going to care so much about how many accolades you have, but the fact that you're able to sort of tie yourself to a program like Fulbright that is so well respected here in the States, and then maybe even more so in DC, right? It's got that sort of political connotation to it, an international relations connotation to it. Whether you're an ETA or a junior researcher, that distinction doesn't matter. It's the fact that you've got Fulbright on your side. And so I think figuring out a way to weave that into your narrative. So let me give you an example. When I was in college, I studied political science. I think a couple of you said the same thing. And for me, I was really involved in sort of the student government at UNC. I was involved in a lot of international projects at UNC. And so in terms of how things flowed to me looking at Fulbright, it was sort of a natural progression of I've been abroad, I've done leadership training, I've done teaching exercises, and I really want to sort of take that to the next level. And then, my time in Korea gave me the chance to sort of expound upon that and really grow as as an individual, but also I would say as an educator in many ways, because as you're probably learning towards the end of your year, being a teacher is as much as it about sort of performing and being on all the time, right? When you're in front of your students, it's not necessarily being the master of the information that you're teaching, but rather it's the ability to stand up there and engage, and part of it's entertaining and keeping them awake. But sort of those skills are really, really transferable to whatever you want to do next, and you'll be able to set yourself apart. So I would say when you're packaging yourself, think about your narrative. Think about what you did in college that got you to this point. Think about how you're growing those skills and growing those capabilities. And then instead of just solely saying, I was a teacher, I was a researcher, think about what you're doing in the classroom, right? So think about the impact that you're having as an international teacher and sort of that ambassadorial role, because for me, the way that I would talk to folks in interviews was that, and we all do, but I would say I have the capability of standing in front of a group that maybe, we're completely different. I have very little in common with a full group of high school girls in Korea, and yet I'm able to sort of off the cuff, capture their attention, deliver sort of whatever ideas that I had outlined for that classroom session, and then get them to sort of meet me where I need them to meet me. And that's a public speaking skill. That's a facilitation skill. That's there's a lot of different ways you could spend what you're doing in your classrooms that really will set you apart, right? So that's sort of a lot at once. I would say lean in on the word Fulbright, because in DC, as we'll get into in a minute in terms of careers, that's going to open doors that you want to open. So and in many ways, sometimes you don't want to like highlight certain accolades because you want to come across as humble, but like in the DC world, use Fulbright. And then beyond that, in terms of the skills that are marketable, think about what you're doing in the classroom, how that would translate to maybe working for a company or working for a nonprofit, etc. Whatever you want to do, think about how you can take what you're doing as a teacher and then sort of sell that, right? So maybe I think just saying that you're a teacher is kind of general. I think being able to think about, critically think about, I have public speaking capabilities, I have what's the right word? You're able to handle change, right? So like when something happens in the classroom and you need to immediately change gears because it's not working, or some students just not getting whatever you're trying to say, you're able to sort of adapt. That's the word. You have adaptability. There's a lot of different sort of marketable skills that come from teaching in a foreign country that teachers here in America probably don't have to experience as much, because there's sort of that extra layer of knowledge and capabilities that ETAs, I think, go through. That was a lot. Did that even answer the question, John?
That was great. Thank you.
We can all hang up if I'm an idiot. It's fine. We can just hang up.
No, that was good. So I'm gonna switch. Courtney, do you want to ask the next one?
Yeah. Okay. So question number 2. When is it best to start letting your contacts know that you are job hunting after the grant year, or that you are job hunting for after the grant year?
Yeah. There's a lot of different. When I read that originally, my gut reaction was yesterday, but I would say that's probably not true, actually, because in DC, so let's like sort of talk about the landscape in DC. DC is probably the most transient city in America, and that is the reputation that it's gotten. It's just well known here in the city that folks come and go, and they move through their careers quickly. I've been here for 3 years, and I've worked in 3 different jobs, and that's not abnormal. So in terms of you guys and where you are right now, physically and sort of in your career, reaching out to someone in DC and saying that you're interested in working, but probably not able to start until at earliest July, right? Because I think you guys come back early July or August. That's not going to really help anyone. Most folks, when they're looking in DC to hire, they're looking for someone who can start like next week. And that is across the board for nonprofits, for political work, for companies, for sort of, it's just the way DC is. And that was something I struggled with, because I really wanted to have things locked down, and probably like most of us, we're somewhat overachievers, and I was really about planning ahead, and by March or April, I was actually thinking I would stay another year in Korea just because nothing had worked out yet, which would have obviously been amazing, and I sometimes kind of wish I'd stayed for 2 years. I'm jealous of you, Jamarli, that you're in your 2nd year. But at the same time, when things did pan out, and I want to say late May, for what I did, and I can talk about that experience, I had been reaching out to folks for about 2 months, and everyone kept saying, don't worry, you're not landing anything because you're not qualified. It's really just because you're not able to start immediately. Now, the caveat to that is that, of course, there are going to be exceptions to that rule, and there are situations and ways that you can network for sure from abroad and start the conversations, not necessarily about employment, but about opening up your options. So I think, and I don't want to jump ahead in terms of questions, but maybe I'll just kind of start giving a perspective on how to get a job in DC. Okay, so I guess, again, let me go back to my situation. Sorry, I live near a fire station, so if there are sirens in the background, apologies. That's actually my first word of advice, is do not move near a fire station in DC when you come to live in DC, because there are apparently a lot of fires in DC. Anyway, so, lost my train of thought. Oh, right. So, okay, so the reason that I actually left Korea and came back was that I landed an internship at the White House, and I would say probably 60 to 70% of people who start in DC probably start with an internship. And as Fulbright scholars, that's a bit of a humbling experience, especially if you worked before your Fulbright, just because you think that, you know, you've had a year of working, you've been teaching, or 2 years of teaching, and that you're professional already and you're ready to jump into whatever. And sort of, I want to level set with everyone and kind of say that DC really values the idea, for better or for worse, that you start at the bottom in whatever career you jump into. And that's not a bad thing at all times. It's, I think it's just sort of a reality. It's hard to find anything above, you know, entry-level positions. And maybe that's fitting for everyone, you know, sort of when they start their career, right? Like, I really didn't know as much as I thought I knew about politics or DC. You know, I thought, oh, I have a degree in political science and I'm a Fulbright scholar. I am ready to be, like, you know, chief of staff to someone. But in reality, you know, you kind of learn from that sort of apprenticeship method here in DC for any career. I mean, folks, I have friends who started nonprofits that started as interns and then got hired. You know, so that was sort of my role. Was I started at the White House and the Office of Legislative Affairs. That was not the office that I had selected to want to work for. I was really hoping I'd get the First Lady's office. I'm just such a big fan, but that didn't work out. So as a solid second choice, I got to work in the Office of Legislative Affairs on the Senate side, and I was there for about 5 months as an intern, and then was hired sort of through an interesting process where, you know, my advice about taking on internships in DC is don't do what they ask you to do and stop. Do what they ask you to do, but also start finding ways to carve out a position so that you become what's the right word? Indisposable. They, like, towards the end of your internship, and they start realizing, oh, he's about to leave because his internship's ending, but we need him because he's doing X, Y, Z. That, you know, I just started doing by myself. I just started sort of taking up, you know, realizing what needed to be done and just doing it to support the staff. That, to me, is the way to do an internship, is to absolutely think about, you know, what can I do above and beyond what they're asking me, so that when my internship's over, they realize that I was a value add to their organization or to their daily work, and by losing me, they will absolutely, you know, have a gap in their progress or efficiency, etc. And so I was able to get, you know, hired on, and then lovely Congress passed the sequestration and the budget, and everyone across the federal agency had to make cuts, and new hires were on the chopping block. So that lasted about 3 months beyond the internship, and that is also a reality about DC, is that if you're looking to work in politics, or if you're looking to work in the government in general, and not necessarily politics, you know, you're at the mercy of politics, and that was a nice dose of humble soup to swallow that day. But so beyond that, maybe I'm jumping ahead. I'll pause. Does anyone have any questions yet? I told you I'm just a rambler and sort of a instinctive responder. I can keep going, but John, I want to pause, or Courtney, and sort of make sure I've answered your questions.
Yeah, we can mix it up. If anyone has a question they want to ask right now, that's fine, or we can move on to the next one.
Anyone?
Okay. We'll
Keep going.
jump on to number 3.
Okay.
What recommendations do you have for someone moving to DC
Hmm.
to look for a job who has never worked there before?
Yeah, we sort of touched on that a little bit. I would say, and what I'll do, actually, I meant to do this beforehand. I have a sort of a standard email that I share with folks who are moving to DC that has a bunch of links. There are a lot of good blogs, a lot of good resources that you guys should start looking at, and really there's a sort of good networks to get involved with. Finding a job in DC is not easy, and I think because of that, there have been groups that have built out resources for folks who are job hunting, and I absolutely, to this day, I still look at them. I'm happy where I am currently at Deloitte, but when every week I probably look at these blogs and these newsletters and emails just to sort of keep on my radar, because I still know friends who are looking for jobs and like to sort of be a resource. So I'll absolutely send that to you, John, and you can blast that out to anyone who's on the call or not even able to make the call. And I think that will be a good start. So I think doing your research about what organizations exist here in DC and what types of jobs exist across government, political, nonprofit, industry, etc. And you'll find that there's an intersection between all of them, and sort of understanding that landscape more, understanding how private companies work with the government, or how the government works with nonprofits, etc. Understanding how that network is laid out will actually help you, because I always thought, 100% I'm going to be a government employee for the rest of my life. I'm going to work for the public, and that's sort of where I want to be. Well, I learned that once I was here and working, that there's so many other avenues to doing the same work that I want to do that might actually be better structured for me and the goals that I have personally. And that's how I found my way to Deloitte, was that I'm now doing consulting for the federal government. So every day I'm still working with government. I'm still absolutely supporting federal initiatives, but I'm doing it from a little bit more of a structured environment that is more supportive of my development, my trainings, my growth, etc., than maybe Congress was, just because Congress is a bit of a zoo right now, or in general. But I love my time in Congress. I'm happy to talk about that at some point. But yeah, so I would say I'm going to send you guys these resources, and just from afar, it's not as easy to do because you're not here and you're not able to sort of meet with folks, in those different fields, for coffee or for lunch or whatever. But that's what I did in Korea. Was I reached out, and a friend sent me a bunch of resources, and that was really helpful to sort of get that early perspective. And I'm happy to share all of that with you guys after this hangout.
Okay. Well, question number 4. Any tips for standing out professionally in a city like DC, where you are surrounded by highly ambitious and intelligent individuals in the realms of government, policy, and international relations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something everyone in their 20s strives and struggles to do, no matter what city they're living in. But I would say in DC, that is certainly a sticking point, because it's funny, every time you are in a work situation, or even at a happy hour, or just meeting someone new at a friend's house, etc., like, you're meeting the cream of the crop. I mean, DC, for all the probably obvious reasons, really does attract some of the smartest, most innovative folks that I've ever met, certainly. And it's tough, yeah. I mean, you can oftentimes feel yourself sort of second guessing your own abilities or professional level, because you're surrounded by all these brilliant people. I would say the thing that I've valued most, and the way that I present myself when I'm trying to be, setting myself apart, I think about a couple of things. I think about, kind of goes back to that idea of the narrative. Again, I think folks are less. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Folks in DC do care about your title, or who you work for, or where you work. I think you'll often hear sort of the comment that DC people, instead of saying like, you know, the first conversation you'll have with someone that you're meeting is they'll ask you, what do you do, or who do you work for, instead of like, where are you from? Because that's sort of a quick assessment of like what's your level in DC, and especially if you're in the political world. I mean, you know, I don't mean to sound I don't mean to make that sound bad, but like it's absolutely sort of a who do you work for is a big deal, because it has for some reason, you know, people care about your proximity to power, your proximity to a member, or, you know, a leader in an agency, etc. And that is a way to sort of rank yourself as a professional in DC in the political world. But I would say in general, when folks ask that question, it's not to be rude or annoying as it has come across to me at times, but it's really just sort of a quick assessment of what are you doing, and then who do you work for, or, you know, what's your impact. But then what I find most interesting is the way, you know, the way that you present yourself is a lot about that narrative, right? So when people ask me, what do you do? My gut reaction is, well, I don't necessarily want to tell them, you know, that I'm just a consultant working as a cog in a machine. I sort of present it in a much more narrative style and say, you know, oh, well, I came to DC 3 years ago. I worked for the president and the White House, and then, you know, really took that experience to Congress, and now I'm consulting agencies on some of their projects from the perspective that I brought, you know, from those 2 previous experiences. And it's a little bit of a longer way to draw it out, but that right there captures the attention of someone that I'm meeting far more than saying I'm a consultant at Deloitte. And so I think, you know, for any of you guys, bringing that narrative of, you know, oh, I'm you know, recently back from living abroad as a Fulbright scholar, and, you know, I'm here in DC to sort of tailor my experience to, you know, to the capabilities and knowledge that I just gained from this awesome experience, and I'm here doing XYZ. Like, to me, that's so much more interesting and so much more captivating than, and I would be more interested in talking to you and learning more about you than you simply just telling me, like, you know, oh, I work for this nonprofit, or I work for whatever. So I would recommend, I guess what I'm saying is push back against, you know, the DC vibe of just saying sort of who you work for or where you work and your position, and instead try to respond to folks when you're presenting yourself and sort of trying to stand out. Present yourself in much more of a narrative fashion, sort of. It's almost like the idea of the elevator pitch, but even shorter, because folks in DC, you know, they're just, you meet so many people that if you want to stand out, you gotta give them something to remember, and you'll find that Fulbright, you know, Korea, teaching, you know, all those types of things are far more interesting than just saying what you do, right? So once you're in DC and you're looking for a job, or you have a job, I would recommend not just leaning on that, but really sort of providing that quick snapshot of who you are and how you got here.
Okay, great. Jamarli, Katrin, Zoe, Luke, any questions right now, or we can keep going through the list? Okay, we'll keep trucking along. How much more competitive is the job market in DC for those without a graduate level degree?
That is such an interesting question. So I don't have a graduate degree. We'll start there. I don't see a need for it currently in my own sort of career path. If and when I get to a situation or a level of my career where I realize that I can't move up, or it's a barrier without it, then I will consider it. But a lot of career opportunities in DC don't require that. So that's where I would start. I will also say that it's not necessarily going to open as many doors as you might think. So I have a friend who did Fulbright. I won't mention his name, but he did Fulbright with me, and he then went to get his master's degree in higher education, and then he moved to DC once he got that, and was looking for a job in higher education policy. And he's been here for a while, I want to say over half a year, and took on an internship. You know, that was actually, he had a master's degree from Oxford, Fulbright experience, and sort of, again, you know, I tried to help him network and gave him all his resources, and, you know, DC basically still was kind of like starting at the bottom is just the way it works. People put in time here, you know, in their careers. So it's hard to find, I would say, you know, what might be more appropriate for him as a mid-level entry, you know, entry position in an organization or company. But you know, I guess he's not an intern, he's a fellow, but it's still sort of that same experience, right? Of, you know, a master's degree isn't always going to open doors in DC that it might in other cities. But the flip side to that is that there are pockets of the landscape here, be it, you know, I'm thinking about like Congress, right? So if you go to school and you study, I don't know, I think we had an engineer on the call, right? So let's say you go to school and you're studying, you get a master's in engineering, then, you know, if you're able to sort of bring a perspective or bring an expertise in a very specific field, you might be filling a void that's needed in a member's office of Congress, or you might be filling a void that's needed in a nonprofit organization. I would say that's more right place, right time type of situation. But I've just, all this is to say that I've found that, I don't know if it's just DC or if it's sort of where we are in our competitive landscape, but a master's degree, if you're thinking about getting a master's degree, you know, I would say only pursue that route at the moment if it's necessary to get you to where you want to be. Don't pursue that route just because you think it's the right thing to do, or you just, like, you know, think that it's the natural next step. Because honestly, and this is such a biased opinion, I'm hearing myself, but I think that folks who go get a master's degree without sort of a goal in mind or even a career path in mind aren't really considering what a master's degree is really about, right? Like, a master's degree is supposed to be sort of a specialized education that is going to help you get somewhere. Whereas I've had friends who've gone to law school or gone to, you know, business school, but didn't necessarily think about what they wanted to do after that, and aren't even using their degree, you know, and what they're doing now. So I would just say that it's, in terms of the competitive landscape, I have not ever really interviewed for a position or gone for a job that discriminated against me because I didn't have a master's degree. I think that, you know, certainly what you'll find in probably job descriptions and you know, postings for jobs, you'll find that they're more interested in years of experience than they are of degree qualifications. So that will be a bigger barrier to most of you than, you know, needing a master's or not needing a master's. It'll be how many years of experience do you bring to the table.
Great. That was awesome. Okay, so number 6, housing. What is your best advice for finding affordable housing? Any tips for apartment hunting while abroad? What resources can/should out of residence take advantage of to find or secure housing in DC?
Yeah, great. So that's I mean, that's everyone's concern, right? Once you figure it out, you want to be in DC, the next step is housing. I have lived in 3 places since I moved here, and I love the place I'm in right now, and I'll sort of tell you how I got here. So the first thing is to consider, obviously, your financials, right? So I was moving back from Korea. I had saved money from my ETA experience, and you know, as soon as I moved back to the States, I sold my Jeep, used that money for rent money. I mean, I was sort of scraping pennies to make it work in DC in the beginning, and so I absolutely found a place that was like $450 a month. It was really cheap, and I got what I was paying for in terms of, it was not the best location, but at the White House internship that was unpaid, you know, I needed something that was you know, just cheap and livable and near the White House, and I could just get to work quickly and sort of push through those 4 months. I think if you're financially able to I was in a basement, so this is a literal statement. If you're able to live above the ground, then then absolutely, you know, there's a lot of resources there. So there are 2 ways to think about finding housing. Be it rooted in traditional methods or simply still a good platform. I don't know what it is, but Craigslist is the way to find housing in DC. I don't think that's true for every city, but DC still posts to Craigslist, which I just find hilarious because it seems so outdated. But I've lived in 3 places, and all 3 I found on Craigslist. And the first place I lived was I found abroad. And what I did was I actually had a friend who was living in D.C. go to, I had reached out to the folks that I found on Craigslist, and I said, hey, I'm abroad, but my friend lives in D.C. and he's going to come over and sort of check it out for me. And he took pictures, he talked with them, the folks living there, etc. And it's right on Capitol Hill. It was perfect for me, what I needed to do. And then we were able to sort of set it up while I was abroad in terms of, they would email me the lease and I signed it, etc., etc. So there's a couple of considerations. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. The other way that you can do housing, and so my roommate is a real estate agent, and I promised him I'd make a plug for his business. There are a bunch of really good companies that are pretty affordable, that absolutely are helpful in folks finding rentals while they're not in DC, and then they'll work with you, and you give them sort of your specifications of, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom, or I'm looking for a 1-bed or a studio, whatever, and this is my price range, and I'm going to be working here, and I'd like to be within a 20-minute commute or something like that, and then basically they will go do all the work for you. And present you with some options, and then they basically play as your middleman. And that is also a good resource. I've had friends who've done that. I personally, just for whatever reason, chose probably the cheaper route and just stuck with Craigslist and did it myself. But I also put in a lot more work. I had to do a lot more research and a lot more searching on Craigslist just to find a place that fit me. And I would also say that not every location worked out. Like, my first place worked solely because it was cheap, but I actually did not like it. I was there for 5 months and then I left. And so I can sort of credit that to the fact that I personally did not go to the house and see it. So while the method of having my friend go was good enough for what I got, there's risk, I think, with making sure that it's a place that you'd be happy with. So that's something just to think about for yourself if you're thinking about housing. Think about what's your financial situation, what are you able to do, and then if you're really someone who and I didn't know this about myself. I thought I could just live anywhere, right? I've lived in a homestay in Korea. I've lived in conditions in West Africa that were far worse than whatever. So I thought I was capable of doing whatever. But when you're actually trying to be a professional in DC, you might want to have a home that is nice to actually retire in. So those things are considered. I would just say if you're someone who thinks you can put in the time and effort on Craigslist or on some of the other sites that are out there, do that. Get to know the neighborhoods in DC, because the neighborhoods are based upon the metro system. And that is easy and quick to sort of do research and figure out. Again, I'm living on Capitol Hill. I've been on Capitol Hill for the 3 years that I've been here. That's really just more of a product of the fact that working in the White House and on Congress, in Congress it was very convenient to be on the Hill. I have a much larger commute now out to Virginia, actually, to work for Deloitte. But my current living situation, I found a row house on Craigslist that had 2 folks already living here looking for a third, and they're the same age as me, a guy and a girl, and turns out I've been here for a year and a half, and they're basically my best friends in DC now. So there are success stories of Craigslist living that I think it works for some people, and there's just like any other situation, college or your homestay family might not have worked out, or there's always going to be a case where it may not work out, but for me, I've actually had pretty good success using Craigslist.
Okay, excellent. Now, a question about your time working for Congress. So, in your opinion, what's the most common misconception about Congress and how things actually work there? What surprised you the most while working there?
Yep. Yeah, this could take the rest of our session. So to give a quick perspective, I did not work for one member. I worked for a committee. And so the way that, for those of you just maybe not as familiar, and again, I studied political science and I thought I knew everything, and then I got to Congress and it's just, experience is so different from the classroom, right? Congress is structured by, you have all the members, and then they have personal staff, and then every member sits on committees, and each committee has staff just for the committee. So I was on the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that basically when the budget committee passes sort of the top number of, okay, we're going to spend this much this year, the appropriations committee then decides who gets what piece of the pie, and it's all between the agencies. And so I specifically worked on the agriculture appropriations bill and the Homeland Security appropriations bill, and so I was on both of those for about just shy of 2 years. But because of that, the way, and I worked for the Democrats, which meant I worked for the minority party in the House of Representatives, and so the committee had about 55 or 56 members total, and it was about like 21 Democrats and however many, someone do the math, Republicans, over 30. And so the way that worked was I worked amongst a team of staffers who would, because we were the minority party, we were not writing the bills. The Republicans would write the bills, their staff would write the bills, and then we basically were allowed to offer amendments and, provide public communication about the bills, or lash out against what we didn't like, or thank them for what we did like in the bills, that kind of thing. And so it's interesting. Like, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes in Congress that people just don't know about. And so I would say that one of the biggest misperceptions is that Congress is completely dysfunctional, because it's not. And in fact, I would say the Appropriations Committee is largely where I found the most bipartisan work. Because if you think about it, if the Appropriations Committee doesn't do its job, then the government shuts down. The irony of what I'm telling you is that my first year on the Appropriations Committee, we did shut down the government, but that is not normal practice. So I'm recognizing that, part of the reason why I left is that I do think we are in such a weird state of politics right now, given that we're sort of in a three-party system, if not four, with the sort of extremities of each party playing a role. But that's a whole different conversation. So I would say beyond the shutdown, which was a fascinating learning experience, I was, our committee is the one that had to reopen the government because it's the funding, it's the Appropriations Committee. And so, we were working 16, 18-hour days during the shutdown on the floor of the House. Our coworkers in the Senate were on the floor in the Senate trying to figure this out. That was a really fascinating experience. But I will say, what we see on C-SPAN or what you see on the news, where members are, on the floor and they're giving their opinion, that is largely, and they, it's what they believe in, but there's grandstanding. There's a purpose. I think the way that the media is now, members of Congress have to think about sort of the soundbite that comes out of what they're doing, right? So their interviews that they do, the speeches they give on the floor, the speeches they give in committees, might be so hyperbolic compared to the conversation that you have with them 10 minutes before, that committee meeting, or 10 minutes before that speech, because of the way that the media might portray it, and then that will obviously reflect back on them and affect their polling and their standing. And I think so. I would say to the question of what is the biggest misperception is that members of Congress are completely out of touch, or that they are dysfunctional, or sort of all the bad things we say about Congress. I just think that really comes from the perception that they have to give off, which is unfortunate. But I do think the speed of and access to information is so much faster than it ever used to be, that I think that's changed a lot of the ways that they have to portray themselves publicly. And it's some members do it better than others on both sides of the aisle. But when it comes to actually talking with them one-on-one, or even doing a meeting between the chairman of the committee, which is a Republican, or a Republican because they're the majority, and then the head Democrat, which is called the ranking member. A meeting between those two people on the agriculture bill was incredibly bipartisan, and you would think that they're both in the same party, right? When they talk, and cameras are gone, and it's just you and staff. It gave me a little bit more confidence in the system, if you will. Seeing that behind the scenes, the end goal is largely the same. It's just sort of the nuanced details that have to be worked out and sort of debated and determined by the leadership of both parties. But for the rank and file members, the members who are not leaders within the party, they are largely bipartisan. Because if they're not, then we achieve nothing. Now, that said, the big issues, right, like immigration or you know, international aid or the UN or what's happening in the Middle East and Iran, you know, those types of things, they're on a bit of a different level. But when it comes to the day-to-day work, like funding the government, deciding, you know, how things are going to go for, you know, the IRS or how things are going to go at State Department, et cetera, those are actually, there's so much common ground there that is just not known in the public. And so I would say that was one of my favorite parts about working in Congress, was seeing just how bipartisan members can be. And that might be because of the committee I worked on, I recognize. Maybe other committees are not as bipartisan, but yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Can you comment on the differences that you found in the workplace or working culture when you were a government employee as opposed to, well, now you're a corporate employee?
Yeah, huge differences. So before I answer that, let me say the reason I left Congress was because, or the reason I really was looking to leave Congress and then ended up at Deloitte was largely because, you know, being on a committee staff, the next youngest person on staff was 36, and it was sort of right place, right time that I got onto the committee. It was through a UNC connection, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, absolutely tap into any alumni network that you have through your schools, of course, but also think about affiliations. I think that's a big thing people forget. Like, it's not just alumni, it's what did you know, what affiliations through your universities do you have? So I was in an a cappella group, I had a scholarship at UNC, I was student body president. You know, those are affiliations that have very specific groups of alumni that, for me, I could access and have a more personal connection with someone I didn't know, but maybe they were in that a cappella group in the late 90s, and so they would want to help me far more than just a random UNC person who reached out to me. So definitely start strategically thinking about, you know, your affiliations that maybe you have back at your schools, and then how to tap into those broader alumni bases for that. But anyway, back to this. I would say that the reason I left was I was plateauing. I didn't see a way to grow or get promoted or really move up because you know, of the age disparity, but also sort of the expertise disparity. I was largely supporting probably some of the smartest people on Capitol Hill, and because we were in the minority, we are already a much smaller staff than the majority, basically because there's just different levels of funding for each side. And so, you know, for me, it was, I'm in my 20s. I feel like I don't have any growing opportunities. I don't feel like I'm learning anything new at this point. I've learned what I can, and I've done what I can. And you know, not to sound jaded, but when you work for the minority and you wake up and you work really long hours all day long, and then it all comes down to a vote that you're going to lose, you know, that was a little bit like, I think us in our 20s, being maybe some overachievers as Fulbright scholars, want to see our work do something. We want to see what impact we're having in whatever we're doing. And so I sort of decided, okay, I want to go somewhere that's going to give me, you know, trainings, and that's going to, you know, actively want to grow my professional development. And so that's why I sort of turned towards corporate. But I knew I wanted to keep working with federal work. So Deloitte was sort of the perfect matchup of, you know, the clients that we work for are the agencies. Right now I'm actually working with the IRS, and previously I worked for USDA agriculture, which was a nice connection from my work. But you know, at Deloitte I'm able to sort of gain, you know, there are internal trainings, and there's a much more formal performance management process. I know what my goals are for the year, and I know what my metrics are that I need to meet by the end of the year, and I know that if I do these things, I'll either get a bonus or I'll be promoted, or, you know, and that to me was important, that in my 20s I'm gaining a skill set that I can market outside of Deloitte. In Congress, the thing that you can market is who did you work for and how long were you there and what did you do. And to me, and that's not going to transfer really outside of DC. It's valued here in DC, you know, your proximity to a member or your proximity to leadership of a party or whatever. But outside of DC, you know, I'm probably thinking of maybe moving back to North Carolina within the next 5 years. I needed to do something that was going to absolutely make me more marketable in North Carolina. And so that's sort of why I turned to that. The difference between the two worlds that I would say is largely what I'm describing. I did not find that Congress had, or government in general, had a very good performance management system. I just didn't feel like there was a lot of opportunities to take trainings and to sort of innovate and be creative, government is largely set in its ways, especially if you're working at an agency. You'll find that folks at the agencies who are not political appointees, right, they're not tied to the Democrat or Republican that's in office. They've been there for 30 years, and they've been doing the same thing every day. And God bless them, they're doing great work. But when you try to come in as in your 20s or early 30s, and you're trying to be sort of innovative, creative, and you want to grow and you want to develop, government can be a hard place to do that. Now, there is a culture that's trying to change that. I think that's something that we're seeing shifting across the government. But there's just less of formal performance management systems that allow people to grow as professionals in the government than I would say at a nonprofit or a corporate company, or somewhere that just does performance management a little bit better. So that's probably the most stark difference between the two. But again, it all really comes back to, what are you looking to get out of your career? What are you looking to get out of that job? Because I don't mean to make government sound as bad as I probably just did. There's obviously a lot of value to working in the government and what you can do, and I think you can have more impact in many ways working for the government than you can for working for a company like Deloitte. And so that's something that I think about from time to time.
Okay, great. We're running a little short on time, so I think I'm just gonna skip 9. I feel like you could probably look that up online or something.
And Matt was the one that asked that, and he's not here. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Matt's not
to
here.
say
Get his question.
Actually, he is on a plane right now. I meant to say that at the beginning, and I forgot. But he didn't judge you the whole time. He's finally flying back to Seoul. Like you bastard.
Okay.
Gotcha. All right, John, skip to 10.
Yeah, before I ask this, does anyone else in this webinar right now have some question, like a burning question that's popped up?
What is that?
Is that Luke?
Hmm?
Oh, maybe that was Zoe's sound. I don't know. Luke, do you have any questions off the?
Okay. Yeah. So, kind of touching off a couple of your points. I did an internship in DC and have interned for a couple of congressional offices, and I'm trying to figure out. I asked the question of kind of like when to let your contacts know that you're that you're like job hunting and stuff like that. And the struggle now that I've started reaching out, just reminding people that I exist. And the big question that I have now is, how direct should you come across or be when you're trying to get somebody to be like, hey, let me know if you hear of any openings, or hey, is there an opening in your office? Like, how direct do you want to come off in this situation now that I've had this weird off year where I haven't been interacting with them?
So lots of thoughts. I would say be incredibly direct and be incredibly short. If you're trying to actually capture someone's attention who works in Congress, do not send them don't send them paragraphs. Send them a, hey, reconnecting. I'm in Korea, but I'm moving back, and I'm available at this date, and I'm looking for a job. I would say that, especially in the political world and in Congress, being more direct will pay off more than being sort of trying to beat around the bush, if you will. In fact, that will probably get your email deleted. So I would absolutely just come across as honest and humble at the same time, but just sort of like a, hey, this is my situation, and I'm available this day. Caught my attention. I think you said you called this year an off year. And I think that's one way to look at it, and I see why you said that in terms of it's an off year from your time in DC. But if you can spin the narrative on that and change their perspective, not make it an off year, but it's rather a year that you had this internship that you did this year in Korea, and now you're coming back and you're more of an expert, or you're more you're more valuable than you were beforehand. Then that to me is better than calling it an off year. I would make sure you don't use that language. Build this year as a year where you are now a better candidate for a job because you did this experience. Otherwise, it'll come across as, well, why'd you leave? And you don't want to do that. You don't want to give that perspective of like, I left and then I realized I wanted to come back. Like that's not good. So I would definitely say phrase it the right way.
Okay.
But yes, I would absolutely be direct. And if you have done that is a terrible sound. If you have done an internship, then I would also say folks expect you to reach out to them if you want a job. I think that's definitely a truth. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
Since you worked in Congress in a partisan position, I was wondering if you could talk us to the differences between working in a partisan position or something more ideological and maybe something that's not partisan.
Yeah. In Congress or in general? Congress. Let me think about that for a second. So there are few positions where partisanship will not have a role in Congress. I'd say, okay, so there are positions where you can work for the House of Representatives as a body, right? I think if you're working for a member of Congress specifically, it's partisan by nature, right? They've got to win an election, there's politics involved, there's fundraising involved, etc. If you're working for a committee, it depends on your role on the staff. For example, on the Appropriations Committee, I can think of a couple of people who were, admin support to the committee, and they were not very political by nature. They sat with the majority, but that's just because the majority runs the committee basically. But they themselves were not partisan, and they did not focus on partisan issues. And then beyond that, there are folks who work for just the institution. There are folks who work on the House floor and support sort of the business of the House of Representatives. But those positions are mostly held by folks who've been there for 15, 20, 30 years because there's such a knowledge, there's institutional knowledge that is so deeply rooted in how the procedure works of the House and how business is done that I'm not even sure how to come by those types of jobs. But it's just hard for me to actually think about like nonpartisan positions because so much of Congress specifically is about do you work for the majority or the minority. That said, I also know folks who work for they may be personally a Republican or a Democrat, but they're actually working for the opposite party because of the position itself gives them the opportunity to work on the issues they care about. So I have a friend who she identifies herself as a Democrat, but she does work on the majority side of the Appropriations Committee, and she works on issues that are not as partisan. But I can't say that she herself is nonpartisan because she's supporting the Republicans' agenda by nature of the fact that she works for the majority. She has bosses that she has to work for and respond to, but maybe it's just issues that aren't as hot of a topic, and so she's not caught up in the partisan bickering. So I think that to answer your question, you'd have to think strategically about what is it you want to do and what type of work do you want to be doing. Do you want to be doing legislative work? Do you want to be doing admin support? Do you want to be doing sort of, whatever? And then you'd have to think about, how would you go about doing that? Is it with a member? Is it with a committee? Or is it with sort of the business of the House as a whole?
I actually kind of have a follow-up question on that, which is,
okay.
Since you mentioned that kind of like your network is so important, there's kind of this acceptance that where you are in DC has to do with who you've worked for. It's like, is there like a hierarchy that usually, like if you're working in a partisan position where you have like this history with these particular members, you're viewed as necessarily more important or having more expertise than someone who's maybe worked for like a nonpartisan nonprofit, and then there's kind of this idea that you don't have power unless you're in a more partisan position.
I mean, you are asking the question of like, what is DC all about? I mean, and that's absolutely, and that's something that I think everyone really tries to figure out, right? Like, so people largely view those worlds as separate, and so if you're trying to move up through one of the worlds of nonpartisan or nonprofit work, then it's not going to matter so much about who do you know and what have you done and all of that. If you're trying to move up through the political world or through the government, then that's where those types of conversations make more sense, and people will care about, oh, you worked for XYZ, and you were there when they accomplished this, which meant that you were part of that. That matters. The intersection, or maybe the crossover between the two that I'm experiencing now that I'm in corporate, is in the area of government relations or government affairs is a big thing that most organizations have, right? They have lobbyists, or they have a government affairs shop built into a system. So let's say like Deloitte, for example, they have a group of people who support the lobbying for the business, and I'm finding that my value, or they've been reaching out to me because I have connections to the appropriations committee, and that's where I worked, and I know the members and I know the staff, and so they don't have those connections, and that's something I'm able to provide them. I could absolutely tell you that there are certain nonprofits that have strategic interest in government money, right? So there's the World Food Program that is interested in how Congress gives food aid money to USAID. So they strategically, you might work for the World Food Program, which is a nonprofit, but they have a government affairs shop that will care about if you've worked in Congress and worked for a member, then that would be something that you could leverage with them and sort of get their attention. But if you're just someone who's interested in food aid and want to work on food aid policy at the World Food Program, that's not going to matter who you worked for in Congress. It's going to matter, what's your expertise in aid development. Do you have a master's degree? That might be a place where a master's would help you, that kind of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Hey guys, so it's 10:04 a.m. here. I've actually got to catch the metro into work, but I do want to sort of maybe capture one more question, and then before that, let me say, if John, I think I have everyone's email address from the webinar invite. I'm happy to send you all resources, and please know, like, networking is a big thing in DC, and you've got me in your network now. If I can do anything to help anyone, absolutely. Our affiliation with Fulbright is something that I want to help folks out with. I've actually helped a bunch of Fulbright folks in the recent years come to DC and find jobs and sort of get their footing, which I think is what this webinar was called. So this has been great for me to reflect and really think about DC, and I hope that it's been helpful to all of you. And I'll definitely pause for maybe one more question before we log off here. Or not.
Anyone? Questions? Yes, no?
I mean, I have one out of personal interest about DC. So if someone has a pressing question on DC.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, just kind of off of something that I was curious if you ever ran into a situation where maybe your personal beliefs were at odds with kind of the goal that you were working towards.
Absolutely. I mean, if anyone finds a job where that doesn't happen, let me know, and I'll switch my career again. Like, happy to find the job where everything perfectly aligns. I think that's something that you'll find in everywhere. I mean, and that's just the nature of, I think, working in a city like DC, where it's decisions are made here, and the decisions made here impact a lot of things that you'll find that you have opinions maybe you didn't even know that you had opinions on, and you may not completely agree. I will say there were certain times in the Appropriations Committee where I disagreed with the Democratic strategy behind something, right? Like, I'm trying to actually think. So one of the things, school nutrition, right? So the First Lady's big initiative on healthy foods in the cafeterias, I'm all about it personally, whatever. There were certain members of Congress who were actually, well, I don't mean to get, this is such a specific example, sorry, but like, there were members who would side with the school lunch ladies about how it was more work for them to, I don't know, switch apples for potatoes for apples or something. I don't know, whatever it was. And I'm just like, personally, it drove me nuts, and like, but it wasn't my job, right? I'm not the elected member of Congress. It's my job to do the research, provide the brief, and then maybe I can sway their position by bringing sort of that point of view, right? That expertise or that perspective as a staffer of, listening to their opinion, providing facts and research, and then, they land where they land, and, ultimately, that's sort of the nature of the work. That's Congress specific, but I think even at Deloitte and even, in any industry, you're going to find that you're not going to agree with everything that's going on, and that's just sort of the nature, I think, of everything. If you're a teacher, you're going to have problems with the education system. If you're in nonprofit, you're going to have problems with maybe how your organization spends all of its money. I don't know, whatever. But like, I think that having that perspective of trying to be someone who can change a perspective or change a narrative, then that's a way that you can have an impact, right? Like you can sort of, if you disagree with whatever's happening, think about a way to sort of move the needle in a different direction from within in your role. Guys, I'm happy to do this again. If folks just want to keep talking, let's, whatever. This is great. I think it's good. I think it's good for you guys to be reaching out to DC. And the other thing is, I'm happy to put you in touch with people. I don't know much about what you guys want to do in DC. So if you want to follow up individually and sort of let me know what you're thinking, I've got contacts that I'm happy, and I'm sure that they would love to reach out to you as well. There's a lot of us Fulbrighters here in DC that work across nonprofit, government, industry, etc. And everyone's story is different, and how they got to where they are. And so I don't want to be the only resource. I'm happy to give you as many as we can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hogan, for talking with us. I will pass on everyone's emails here to you, and then also if you send me that link of resources you mentioned, I can forward that to everyone.
Yep, and send it to anyone that's there that wasn't able to join the call as well. They're pretty intuitive resources.
Yeah, and this was actually this is our first Google Hangout video call on air, so we actually have it recorded.
What?
Yeah.
You didn't tell me that.
If it's okay with you, this might be, if it's all right with you, we might post this on our newly created website. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think that's good for whatever value that's going to bring to anyone. I hope that that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, thank you again.
Thanks so much.
We'll let you catch your bus or get out of here.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. And again, just reach out anytime. Happy to talk.
Oh, John, we need to take a picture.
Oh, we have to take a picture, Hogan.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, let's do it.
1 second.
Whoa, how does this work?
What?
This is also my first Google Hangout ever. How weird is that?
Okay, everyone smile. 3, 2, 1.
Wait, do it again. Do it again. I wasn't ready. Okay.
Oh, Korean. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Perfect.
Wow,
Great.
Great.
Awesome. Okay.
that is crazy.
Cool.
All right, bye, guys.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so much, Hogan. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
That photo is adorable.
Where is it? Who's that person in the background taking a selfie, Marley?
Marley, you got your whole group over there. Yo.
We are here.
Who's
Full break.
taking the selfie?
What's up, Kev?
What's up, man? What's good? Homestay brother right here. You know what I'm saying?
Hello.
What up, though? What up, though?
Oh, that picture's so weird.
Great.
I'm smiling too big.
Look at this picture right here, man.
Well, I mean,
Ah!
anyone, but that's fine. It's funny though that he was like, "Wait, I wasn't ready."
That was adorable. I do wish I had known it was being recorded beforehand.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, you can speak up if you don't want it posted.
If I talk right now.
What?
We don't. If you are not okay with us posting it, we do
Oh,
not
no,
have to post it.
I'm
Okay.
totally okay with it.
Okay.
I'm totally
Okay.
okay with it. It's just that I feel like no one's going to look at me, obviously, because he's the big picture, but I imagine that if someone did, they'd be very confused by how much I play with my hand.
No, it's okay.
So, are you thinking about posting this on the website that's open to the public in general, or this?
I
one
need to stop the broadcast.
shoot?